This is a Going Back, Remembering UGA interview with Dan Magill, longtime sports information director and head tennis coach at the University of Georgia, conducted by Fran on April 20th, 2006. We are at the ITA Collegiate Tennis Hall of Fame building at the Magill Tennis Complex on the University of Georgia campus in Athens, Georgia. It's springtime here in Athens tennis season, and apropos to that, we're talking with Coach Magill, whose 60 years plus relationship with the University of Georgia and its athletic program makes him truly a legendary figure in these parts. Coach Magill, thank you for being with us today.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here and talk about Athens and University of Georgia.
Well, let's start at the beginning, and the beginning was right here in Athens. You're an Athens boy, aren't you?
They say I was the first baby born at old Athens General Hospital, January the 25th, 1921. Most everybody was born at home before those days. Dr. Ralph Goss Sr. delivered me, and the hospital then was a 3-story converted home, a beautiful old antebellum 3-story home at the current site of the hospital. And later, just a few years later, they put in the first wing of the regional hospital, which is there now. And they made the original hospital a 3-story home. They made it the nurses' home, but it was torn down when they began building, putting in the brick wing for the Athens Regional. But my mother and father were from Athens. My father was really from Hartwell, Georgia, born in Hartwell, Georgia. His father had been editor of the Hartwell Sun, James Thomas Magill. But my father came to the University of Georgia. He was a senior at Georgia in April 1917 when war broke out with Germany. There were about 25 boys, not many students, in Professor Park's English class. Park Hall now is named for Professor Park. And Professor Park said to those 25 boys that day when Germany and the United States declared war on each other, he said, every red-blooded American boy should join the United States Army today and fight for democracy. The next day, there wasn't any need for Professor Park to be at class. They'd all joined the United States Army. And my father was in the American Expeditionary Forces in France during World War I. But he came, he never got to graduate, but he just lacked about a month or two of graduating, but he came back and was married. My mother, who was Elizabeth Garlington Carroll, her father was editor of the old Athens Herald. Eugene Winston Carroll was his name, and he sold the Herald to the Athens Banner around 1920, and it became the Athens Banner Herald. And my father worked for the Banner Herald many years and became the editor in the 30s and 40s. And my mother went to old Athens High School. She was very smart, graduated a valedictorian. Mr. Mill, old Professor Ted Mill was principal then, and he later was principal when I did not graduate valedictorian. But anyway, she was in the first women's class at the University of Georgia, my mother. But she didn't have to, but she quit school when I was born. So she never graduated either. But I did. They gave me a diploma in 1942 in journalism. But it's been a great pleasure growing up in Athens as a boy. And I grew up at the Athens Y. I started going there when I was about 8 years old. And the Athens YMCA, like the University of Georgia, has really been a great institution. And then I grew up on the campus, hanging around the athletic field, starting out as a boy. I'm getting my breath now. But I can tell about the Athens Y.
Talk about the Y. Was that Mr. Walter Forbes? Was he there?
Yeah. The Athens YMCA is the 3rd oldest YMCA in the United States. The oldest Y is a Young Men's Christian Association. And there's a special college in Springfield, Massachusetts, where the Young Men Christian Association physical instructors were turned out. They invented the game of basketball. And the first YMCA was, I believe, at Harvard. The second one was at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And the third YMCA in the United States was on the Georgia campus, the University of Georgia campus in the 1950s. And the one who brought it to Athens was Thomas R. Cobb, later General Thomas R. Cobb, killed in the Battle of Fredericksburg while serving with Lee's army in Northern Virginia around in the 1960s. And you know, his daughter, they named Lucy Cobb for General Cobb's daughter. And but the Athens YMCA that became open to everybody in town, especially boys, young boys, was that I went to was located on the corner of Lumpkin and Broad, where Holiday Inn's parking lot is now. And the first physical director, I believe, was Walter Toulouse Forbes, W.T. Forbes, and he started the Athens Y camp up above Tallulah Falls. He was a great fellow, and he was, it was appropriate that he be the first basketball coach at Georgia in the early 1900s because, you know, the YMCA's up at Springfield invented the game of basketball. And they pioneered in the promotion of so many sports, gymnastics and softball and basketball. And but I grew up as a boy at the Athens Y and also hanging around the Georgia athletic fields. When I was 10 years old in 1931, well, let's see, get back 2 years before that, I saw my first football game. It was against Yale. In October 1929, they dedicated Sanford Stadium. 30,000 fans in the stadium then, it goes 95,000 now. They had 18,000 seats on the north side, 12,000 on the south side. And everybody was talking about, I was just 8 years old, and everybody was talking about the big game, the big football game coming up. Well, I thought I could play in the game. I didn't know it was between two colleges. So I went down to the game. I told my daddy I want to be there. And he got Charlie Martin to pass me in. It was Charlie Martin was a business manager athlete. He passed me through the gate. And I had walked from my own. In those days, everybody walked everywhere. There wasn't many automobiles. And I was dressed up in my football uniform. I'd got it for Christmas present. And Charlie Martin passed me in the gate, and I said, "Where's my daddy?" And he was in the press box then. He wasn't a sports writer, but it was such a big deal. The governors of all 9 southern states were there in ceremonies before the game. And I ran down to the press box, and I found my daddy. "Daddy, they've already chosen sides." I was so disappointed I didn't get to play. But he said, "Yeah, you just go on down there and on the sideline there's a little sidewalk around the field, you know." And that's where I watched the game from. I didn't know anything about the game, but my biggest memory of the game was the Yale band was really fancy. The Georgia band was the boys were just dressed in old military uniforms, and they were nothing like the great Georgia band now today. But Yale had a crack band, and they had on white helmets and blue coats, and they played a song that everybody when they played this tune, everybody in the grandstand stood up and cheered. And I asked my daddy later on, what was that song? It was Dixie. They made a lot of friends playing Dixie.
They did. Talk to us a little bit. I had read it somewhere that you were a bat boy and the manager of the tennis courts.
Well, as I say, I grew up on the Georgia campus, used to cut the grass in the field. I even cut the grass with a push mower in Sanford Stadium as a boy. I wasn't the head boy. There was an old fella named Tom, and on hot days he'd get tired, and I'd say, "Tom, in fact, his name was Uncle Tom, and he was an old fella, and I'd say, "I'll cut the grass, you just sit down here in the shade." So as a boy, I used to do all that. I was an all-American flunky, and grew up I started off chasing foul balls. The baseball park then was at the bottom of Lumpkin Street, and it was a big sport. Have I already told this story for you? Or,
no, so you go ahead and tell it.
Tell it again. You know. And, but eventually I worked my way up to bat boy, and I had the most famous person, one of the most famous persons in the history of the University of Georgia, teaching me how to stack the back. It was Clegg Stark, the famous water boy. And I want to talk at length on Clegg later on, because he grew up on the Georgia campus. He was President Barrow's cook's son, and he lived in their home on the campus. But anyway, that's another story. Baseball was a big sport in those days. The merchants closed the store at 12 noon, and the band would assemble in front of the arch and march all the way to the Sanford, it was called Old Sanford Field Inn at the bottom of Lumpkin. And I really was on the payroll at the University of Georgia at that time. That was 1931 or 2. I was 10, 11 years old. And the coach was old Bill White, and he told me he wanted me to clean up under the grandstand after every game. And he said he had no money to pay me. It was just 2 years after the Great Depression. Stock market blew up in 1929. And he said, you can keep all the money you find. And I found a lot of Indian head pennies, which I still have. And one day I found a silver coin. And I went up to Coach White and said, Coach White, what is this? He said, it's yours. That's a silver dollar. I'd never seen one. I showed it to my dad, and he made me go down to College Avenue at the bank where Howard McQuirter was manager. He was a younger brother of the great Bob McQuirter. And I started a bank account, but I don't know what happened to that dollar. I think my dad had spent it for food for
Talk about your days. I know the tennis, I had read that you were manager of the tennis courts after that. And
I did all kind of flunky jobs, and in high school I hung around the tennis courts. And my senior year in high school, when I was going to be a freshman at Georgia the next year, Johnny Broadnax was a business manager of the athletic department, and he told me he wanted me to look after the courts in the summertime. And he said he had no money he could pay me. We were still in Depression years, but that I could charge 10 cents for anybody playing, students, faculty, town folks, anybody. But I had to manage the courts. I had to ride my bicycle down in the morning and water them and drag them and roll them and line them off with wet lime then. And that's how I got interested in tennis. And we used to have a city tournament and a Northeast Georgia tournament. And I wanted to have a bigger tournament, bigger name than Northeast Georgia. So I didn't give the name. My father gave it the name, the Crackerland. So the Crackerland tennis tournament began in 1939, and later on, after the war, when I returned to Athens, it grew into one of the biggest tournaments ever held. When I retired as director of tennis at Georgia in 1994, I thought they'd continue it, but it wasn't continued. I did it just for the fun of it, and anybody carrying on that type of tournament is a lot of work for nothing.
Tell us a little bit. I know I had heard a story, and maybe you told it one time, Coach, about, and this maybe was after you were in college, but you were a member of an on-field crew during a football game. I think you were holding a down marker.
Well, that was the last time, yeah. When I was in college, we didn't have many managers on the football team. I used to field the punts, you know, when the punters were punting, and also in the scrimmages, I would hold the chain, you know,
right,
in the scrimmages. And this was in 1946. Georgia was playing a big game in mid-season against Alabama. Both teams were undefeated. Charlie Trippi was our big star. They had a great All-American quarterback named Harry Gilmore, great passer. And I was a young sports writer for the Atlanta Journal then. I just got out of the Marine Corps, in fact, in December of '45, and I was working for the Journal. And I was just a young sports writer, and I wanted to see that game. And they were going to send their older, more experienced sports writers to cover the big game, Georgia and Alabama. But I said to Colonel Ed Danforth, I said, please let me go over there in some capacity. I said, I'll ask Coach Butts if I can hold the chain, and I'll ride a sideline ball, you know. So Coach Butts let me hold the chain. In those days, alumni, it was a great honor for them to hold the chain with an alumnus of the opposing team. And that day, the opposing team's alumnus was an old fellow in the 70s, 80s. He had been captain of one of Alabama's first teams. He was a lawyer in Birmingham. And on this particular play, Charlie Trippi ran about 45 yards down the field for a touchdown. And when I used to hold the chain on practices, you know, I'd run down the field with them. We would run down. Well, you wasn't supposed to do that in this. An official chain holder wasn't supposed to do that. But I ran down the field and jerked the little old Alabama guy. I carried him halfway down the field with Trippi, and he was cussing me from here to kingdom come. And after that game, the Southeastern Conference, or after that season, said, no more alumni will hold the chains. The chains will be held by regular striped officials. So that was a great honor.
You brought about another
That was
chain.
a great honor for me to cause this.
Tell us a little bit about your college years. I know you got an ABJ in 1942, but you played on the varsity tennis team and you swam.
Well, there's a good story connected with the Athens YMCA. They had a good swimming program. They pioneered in the development of swimming. Had a 20-yard pool, and the physical instructor was originally was a fellow named Clarence Jones, and he later became the trainer and boxing and swimming coach at Georgia, Jonesy. But we used to win the state high school swimming championship every year. Athens High would win it every year. And I thought we were supermen, but I found out why we used to win it. There wasn't but 3 swimming pools in the state of Georgia. One of them was in Athens, and the other one was at the Atlanta YMCA where Tech High and Boys High swam. But for some reason, we'd usually win it. And I just figured it out. The other boys had to swim in rivers and lakes. But that's another great thing that the Athens Y did, develop a lot of swimmers. And
now, did you meet?
Have I already told about Thomas Cobb?
Bringing the Y here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I did tell her.
Did you meet Ms. Magill while you were in college?
I was lucky to meet my wife from an old French family in New Orleans. Her father's name was Louis Favreau Reynaud, from a very old French family. And in fact, this past summer, they had their 250th family reunion.
My goodness. 5
families down there had their 250th. That was before the United States became the United States. There was Spanish and French were down in that part of the United States, and they called them Creoles when they intermarried. But there were 5 families, and one of the families was the Reynaud, R-E-Y-N-A-U-D, and the other family was Favreau's. They were 2 of the 5 families. But anyway, her father didn't, the Reynauds started the Tulane University Medical School. But her father didn't go there. He went to LSU and graduated with a law degree. And he happened to be head of the claims department at the Hartford Insurance Company in Atlanta when she was in high school. She went to Old Decatur Girls High. And there were so many of her friends coming to the University of Georgia that she came to the University of Georgia, was a Phi Beta Kappa, and president twice of Kappa Alpha Theta sorority. And I was real lucky when she agreed to marry me. She was a She graduated in 3 years. It took me 4.5. But she graduated in 1943. I was in the Marine Corps. And we were married in the Old Episcopal Church here in Athens in May 21, 1944. And we lived in Atlanta when I worked for the Atlanta Journal 3.5 years, but when Coach Butts brought me back September the 1st, 1949, he wanted to build up minor sports, give scholarships. And he wanted me to be his assistant athletic director to do that, help him. And I was looking forward to doing it. But the first week I was here, he lost his sports information director, and he said, I want you to fill in as sports information director. Well, I did fill in for about 30 or 40 years. And also, we never did get to develop the minor sports because we began losing football games. Lost to Tech 8 straight years. They were having, Bobby Dodd was in his heyday, they had 50-something thousand. At all their games, our attendance fell down to 10 or 15,000, had no money. But we did, Coach Butts was bemoaning that fact, and I told him our strength, Coach Butts, is in every county in the state, we're the majority party in alumni. We've got more alumni than Atlanta, than Tech. So we ought to organize Bulldog clubs in all 159 counties, and that's what we did. We started in '53. Took us several years to do so, but we organized them. I spoke in all 159 counties of the state, and we'd organize 3 in a day sometime, at a small town, at a breakfast meeting, a little larger town, a luncheon meeting. The big town would be a night meeting. And in the big cities, we'd have 6 or 7 counties all belonging to the same. It took several years, but we finally were organized, and we'd start every meeting. Fellow Georgia Bulldogs, chosen people, members of the great majority party of this Empire State of the South. So that was a lot of fun traveling.
You were leading a rich, full life then.
Oh yeah, I loved it. They say I was really enjoying my work.
But very busy, I know. I want to go back and ask you real quickly, when you were at the Atlanta Journal, I've seen that you were credited with a number of things, but one of those was the Georgia High School AllStar baseball game.
Well, Georgia High School AllStar football game. Yeah, I was promoted high school sports, the first real coverage of high school sports. And they gave me free rein on Sundays. They gave me a whole page devoted to high school sports. The one-star edition went to South Georgia, and the whole page was just devoted to stories on the towns, the high schools in that part of South Georgia. Then the 2-star was to Middle Georgia. We replated, and just the 2-star that went to Middle Georgia was just Middle Georgia school. The 3-star was to North Georgia, Athens. And then the 4-star, which we replayed at about 1 a.m. and Sunday morning, went to the Atlanta schools. That was a lot of fun, but they, Mr. George Biggers, who was general manager of the Journal, saw the circulation was increasing in the small towns because of the high school sports coverage. He says, let us get in cahoots with the Georgia High School Association and put on the high school all-star football game, co-sponsored. They hadn't been putting it on at Georgia Tech at Grant Field and didn't have many fans. Well, I put it on twice, and it was just Journal's tremendous promotion. They also owned WSB Radio, which we had a little radio show too, promoting high school sports. Well, the first year was 24,000 fans. The second year was 28,000 fans. And that was the only 2 years the Journal co-promoted and it's never been the same since. But we did the same thing in baseball. We had the county all-stars meet the city all-stars, played Old Ponce de Leon Park. And I brought in Spurgeon Chandler, a Georgia boy. Been a great, he was a star pitcher for Georgia when I was a bat boy, and he later pitched on 4 World Championship team New York Yankees. he came down and managed the county All-Stars. And we brought Whitlow White, who had gone to Georgia Tech one year. He was from Cedartown, Georgia. And he had retired as a pitcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He was a great pitcher. He managed the city All-Stars. And while he was there at that game, and we had a sellout crowd, 13,000 for that game. I don't think he charged but a quarter or 50 cents, but it was the biggest crowd, overflow crowd for that game. And while Whitlow White was there, Earl Mann, the general manager of the Atlanta Crackers, saw Whitlow. He said, "You ought to get back in baseball, Whitlow." He signed him up to be the Atlanta Crackers manager, and he later was the first manager that the Atlanta Braves had, Whitlow White.
I'm not sure, but that you give Ringland a run for his money, Coach Magill.
Let me tell you something about Ringland. That's one of my greatest memories. In the old days as boys, Ringland Brothers, Bonham and Bailey was the biggest thing that happened to the boys in town. We just loved the circus when it came to town. And I remember one time, John Ringland North, they've had some circus pictures in which different actors portrayed John Ringland North. Well, anyway, I was down at the old Athens Herald offices where the county courthouse is now. I mean, the federal building is now on Hancock. I was down at the old Herald building when John Ringland North came in with some pictures and some stuff, material for my father to run in the Herald, telling about what the circus was going to have. And I was there. I was about 12 or 13 years old. And John Ringland North asked my dad, he says, "Young Dan here, we'd like to take him on the cities we go to in Georgia, let him travel with the circus. I'll have somebody look after him where the lions and tigers won't eat him up." That's what he said. And I said, "Oh, Daddy, please let me go." And he let me go, and we went to Macon, we went to Columbus, Savannah, Augusta, just 3 or 4 towns. And that was the most thrilling thing I believe I've ever been on. And the star of the circus then was a young trapeze star, the great Wallander. He was a young star then. He later became famous. He walked across the Tallulah Gorge later. But he was, in his youth, he was a star on the flying trapeze. Later on, when he was old, he became famous for carrying his whole family on his shoulders, you know. And he died in San Juan, Puerto Rico. They were dedicating some two new skyscrapers in San Juan, and he was walking across on a windy day, and if just one person falls, they all fall. And several of them died, including the great Wallander, but I'll never forget him and John Ringland North.
Well, now, did you go on the train, on the circus train,
and
we
travel
went
on the circus train, that's absolutely. And I was scared to death every night that, that the tigers might get loose and eat me. But that was one of my most vivid memories of Athens. I wish they had they don't have the old circuses anymore, do they?
Not the same way, certainly not. So wow, is all I can say. That's a great story. You need to write that one up. Have you written that one?
No, I haven't. I am writing my memoirs now in the Marine Corps. A lot of funny stories in the Marine Corps.
You need to write about your circus trip too. You said Coach Butts brought you in here in '49. Yeah. And the challenge initially was going to be to support minor sports. And then it was the sports information director's job. But you did it all. You did everything.
Well, yeah, Coach Dooley has said that 30-something people now do the jobs that I did, the 3 jobs I did. But I did it just as a love of money. But I did want to talk about one of the most colorful characters I knew in my many years hanging around. I was an All-American flunky. I wasn't an All-American tennis player or swimmer, but I was an All-American flunky. And but I want to talk about David. I've known all the famous people at Georgia, starting with the star catcher on Georgia's first athletic team, baseball in 1886. I didn't see him play, But I'm talking about John Marsh. That was a famous family of Marshes. They came down from Virginia after the war between the states and joined the faculty. And Charles Ed Marsh was one of three brothers. He was the star pitcher on the 1886 team, and his younger brother John Marsh was the catcher. The oldest boy was Sylvanus Marsh. He was quite a character and later dean of many years for the law school, and the law school dormitory is named Marsh all for him. But of course I never saw John Marsh or those fellows play baseball in those days, but John Marsh taught me German when I was in college, and he must have had a great arm when he was a catcher, because when boys didn't pay attention in his class, he would throw the blackboard eraser and hit them right in the head. And one day he hit me in the head, but it wasn't because I was not paying attention. I was paying attention. I was too scared not to pay attention. I didn't want to get hit with that blackboard eraser. But the boy in front of me was the one he was aiming at, and he ducked, and the eraser hit me in the head. But John Marsh was he later was faculty chairman of athletics. But getting back to David Crenshaw Barrow, he lived on the campus and was president many years. Barrow County was named for him. And Barrow Elementary School, I went to Barrow Elementary School, first to the fifth grade. And I met him when I was a boy. His son, David Crenshaw Barrow Jr., lived on Cherokee Avenue, just right across the street from me. And old Professor Barrow, they called him Uncle Dave, the students did in those days. But I met him when I was over there playing with David Barrow III. And I got to meet old Uncle Dave then. That's the only time I met him. But the best story on him, I think, he lived on the campus, or one of the best stories, and his cook lived in the basement. And her son was a young black named Clegg Starks. His name was Ples, P-L-E-A-S, but he was tongue-tied. And but he was just, when he was 8 years old, he didn't have to go but 100 yards over to Hurdy Field to watch the baseball team play, watch the football team play. And Alex Cunningham was the coach when Clegg went over there as a boy, and he asked him his name, and he says, he tried to say Ples Stark, but he was tongue-tied, and Coach Cunningham thought he said Clegg, C-L-E-G-G, and he became known as Clegg Stark. But when he died, I wrote about him, and his daughter said his name really was P-L-E-A-S, Ples Starks. And it wasn't Stark, it was S-T-A-R-K-S too. So I had been misspelling it for a long time till he died. But anyway, Clegg later learned to throw a football 100 yards. It was due to his hanging around the fields as a boy. And then he later became he could throw a baseball faster than anybody I've ever seen. He won an AllStar, a Negro baseball game in Charleston, South Carolina, defeated the most famous baseball pitcher of his day, Satchel Paige, Clegg Starks of Athens, Georgia, beat him in that All-Star baseball game. And the halftime show at Georgia's football games in the 20s, Coach Stegman was my mentor, Herman Stegman. Because I'd be down there as a bad boy, and we'd both walk home up Lumpkin Street after practice. I'd just tag along with Coach Steg. He lived out there at the end of Lumpkin, and I'd walk with him up there. But Clegg could throw the football 100 yards. And at halftime of the Georgia football games, this was before they got into the new stadium, it would be Clegg throwing the football from one end of the stadium to the other. And they used to have a lot of fun together when we played the Eastern teams up in New York City or Yale and New Haven. The sports writers would ask Coach Stegman. He wasn't coaching, he was the athletic director then. But they'd say, do you have it in you boys this year that we ought to keep an eye on? He said, yeah, we got a boy who can throw the football 100 yards. And they said, oh, you can't do that. We'll bet big money you don't have anybody who can throw the football 100 yards. So then he'd call Clegg over, and they'd make their bets. He would throw the football kind of sidearm, 100 yards. Clegg's arms touched the ground. He had long arms, 100 yards, and Coach Stegman would collect the money. It was known as the Steg and Clegg Act.
You mentioned Coach Stegman. How many athletic directors have you known?
Well, they used to have faculty chairman of athletics, and Dr. Sanford was the first famous faculty chairman of athletics. Sanford, the original Sanford Field named for him, and then Sanford Stadium appropriately named for him. He originally he had played baseball at Mercer University, but he came up to Georgia and he was an English professor. And I first met Coach Stegman on train trips. I stowed away on the train as a boy going up to New York. The conductor knew I was there, but he didn't care because I stayed in the lounge with Clegg. That's where Clegg and I stayed, in the lounge. And Coach Stegman, Dr. Sanford, after all the players and coaches had gone to bed, he would like to go into the lounge and have a libation of some kind. And he and Clegg would have a libation. He never offered me a drink or anything. But he'd spend a little time, and that's when I first knew Coach Steg. And on trips, if he wanted anything, I would be his flunky. And so I was a flunky for Dr. Sanford, and he was the first real athletic director, faculty chairman of athletics, they called it. But Coach Steg was really, he was the greatest man I've ever known in athletics at the University of Georgia, Herman Stegman. He was a Dutchman. He was born in New Holland, Michigan, and he wore wooden shoes as a boy. But he came to Athens around 1919. He had been in the YMCA program, and they were the physical instructors for Army outfits, YMCA men. And he was at some Army base when the war ended, and he had gone to the University of Chicago, was a great all-around athlete under Amos Alonzo Stagg, the famous coach at Chicago. Had been one of his greatest athletes, his greatest all-around athlete, according to Stagg. And he got him a job at Georgia as assistant football coach and head baseball coach, Stagg did. And he came to Georgia in 1919 and was the baseball coach. And then he later coached football 3 years, became athletic director, but he loved track and basketball, and he coached them a long time. He coached track up through 1937 when we won the conference, and Spec Towns was the big star on that team. And but he was, I learned so much from him about athletics, eavesdropping. I'd listen to him talk to the different coaches because I was a flunky hanging around the field. I'd listen to him talk to the alumni when they'd come. I'd just eavesdrop. I learned a great deal from him, and I'm so glad they named Stegman Coliseum basketball home for him, because he started basketball in the South. They had teams, but they never had a tournament. But in 1920, he started the first Southern Conference basketball tournament. They played in Atlanta at the Old City Auditorium. And Georgia was an original power in basketball due to Herman Stegman, Dutch boy. He had a wonderful family too. He had twins, John Stegman and Joanna. They were twins, and then his youngest daughter was Marion Stegman. She married Ned Hodson. She's married Ned Hodson, and she's been put into the Georgia Aviation Hall of Fame April the 30th at the Hall of Fame at Warner Robins Field in Macon. She was a WASP, woman's air pilot, during World War II, Marion Stegman.
She flew.
Yeah, she and I were in the first grade together. She skipped the second grade and passed me.
Talk to us a little bit more about, we talk about athletic directors now, so early on, it was Coach Stegman. Now, was
Coach Steg was athletic director a long time, and he, as much as Dr. Sanford got the Yale team to come down and dedicate the stadium. Yale was a power up east, and when we dedicated the stadium, we wanted to get Yale here, and there were several things that got Yale to leave the east for the first time to dedicate our stadium. It was a big honor to get them down here, and one of them was the fact that our first presidents came from Yale. They were Yale graduates, and another one was that Coach Stegman was on the National Football Rules Committee with some famous athletic directors, including the Yale athletic. They had been longtime friends. So he really had as much to do with getting Yale to come down, friendship with the Yale athletic director, as Dr. Sanford did, and pushing it. And I'll tell you, another fellow who was one of Georgia's greatest people was Charlie Martin. He was business manager of athletics. He came to Athens in 1908 from Middle Georgia, a little country town. And he was Bob McQuitter's Boswell. Bob McQuitter was a big football star in 1910, 11, 12, and 13, our first All-American in 1913. And Charlie Martin was what they called a sporting writer in those days. And he wrote sports for the old Athens Banner. And he was known as Bob McQuitter's Boswell. And a lot of people don't know it, but Bob McQuitter Sr., I was in school with Bob Jr. A lot of people, when I used to travel the State Bulldog Club, they would say, did you know Bob McQuitter? Did I know Bob McQuitter? I say, we played in the same backfield together, Bob McQuitter Jr. and I, and touch football at the University of Georgia. I never saw Bob McQuitter Sr. play football, but I did see him play softball. He was in his late 40s. Faculty All-Stars were playing the University All-Stars in softball, and we played on Old Hurdy Field. I was playing center field, and Bob McQuitter was in his late 40s, and he hit the longest softball home run I've ever seen. Home plate was right about where the chapel bell is, not far from it. Went over my head over the old beanery, where the landscape architecture building later
Denmark
came in.
Hall.
Denmark. But anyway, it went out of sight into Lumpkin Street. So he was some kind of athlete, Bob McQuitter.
All right.
Have I skipped something there?
You're doing great.
I get off on.
We got
Martin.
Oh, Charlie Martin, yeah. Charlie Martin was really a great man in the history of Georgia athletics. His counterpart at Alabama, the big goal for people after World War II was to get in the Rose Bowl, get an invitation to the Rose Bowl. And all schools wanted to get there. It was the biggest honor. They didn't have but one bowl, the Rose Bowl. Whoever went there was national champion if they won. And Alabama went before we did. They were the first Southern team to go in the mid-20s. And Charlie Martin was business manager at Georgia, and he also really was the first sports information director too, but he didn't have that title, he just had title, business manager of athletics. But his counterpart at Alabama was a friend of his, and he let Charlie go with the Alabama team to the Rose Bowl. He was so impressed by the roses, the rose hedge around the Rose Bowl, that he says, we ought to do that at Sanford Stadium. When they were making plans then to build the stadium. But it was 29, several years later, before they built it. But he says, well, that's when he got the idea. No, they built the stadium, and Charlie Martin says, we ought to have roses around there. But the horticulture says roses won't do here. They might work out there, but they won't work here. So they got the English privet hedge, privet ligustrum hedge. And Charlie Martin is responsible for
between the hedges, huh?
Between the hedges. But you know, Dr. Michael Dunn, our horticulture partner now, has a prettier hedge than the privet hedge now. He has loropetalum, which has a red blossom. And the hedge is right around the field, or the famous privet hedge, English privet ligustrums, small leaf. They have a big leaf, but this is a small leaf. And then on the other side of the sidewalk, right next to the stadium, now, Coach Dooley got it put in. He was interested in gardening. And Dr. Michael Durr, D-I-R-R, in Georgia's horticulture department. He popularized the shrub loropetalum, and that hedge is just magnificent. And people don't know about it, but they know about the privet here between the hedges. But that loropetalum is magnificent, when in full bloom too.
Let's talk a little bit about when you came back, and after you got the Bulldog clubs going, how did we get UGA?
Well, in the old days, a lot of people think that, mistakenly think that we're the Bulldogs because Yale had a mascot. Had a mascot for a long time. But we didn't do it because of our association with Yale. In the early 20s, Coach Stegman had such a great defensive team, and it tackled so ferociously that an Atlanta sports writer around 1922 said Georgia's defense, they just was as ferocious as a bulldog. And that's how they got the nickname. They began calling the Bulldogs gradually. And people, originally, several alumni would bring Bulldogs to the sidelines. And they were none of them were the official Bulldog, you know. But by 1942, our Bulldog was from, it was an English Bulldog. We had brindle Bulldogs, but we had an English Bulldog at some alumnus in Columbus, Georgia, carried to the Rose Bowl. And there's a connection between UGA and that mascot. We had a brindle Bulldog in 1953 or 4. He used to live in the old field house where the Rankin Smith building is now. He lived in the attic, and there'd be some boys on minor sports team that they just live up in the attic. They could live free up in the attic, but they had to let the dog out and walk him and feed him and everything. And that's when, but when this brindle Bulldog died, Coach Bush says, "Get us another mascot." And I put a story in the paper. If we were looking for a new mascot, anybody that had one, get in touch with me. Well, immediately, a law school student, Frank Seiler, Sonny Seiler, came up to me and said he and his wife Cecilia had a little puppy. And I had known Sonny when he was on the swimming team at Georgia. And so I went out to their apartment. I think it was somewhere on Millage, and saw the little puppy. It was an English Bulldog, white. And he looked all right to me, and they told me that he was the grandson of our Rose Bowl mascot in Columbus. Cecilia was from Columbus. And I think it may have been a cousin of hers who had the Rose Bowl mascot. And I went to Coach Butts and I said, "I'll take you out there and you can see this little puppy, see if you think he ought to be the mascot. And by the way, he's the grandson of your Rose Bowl Bulldog." He said, "I ain't got time to go out there right now, but if he was the grandson of our Rose Bowl mascot, he's got good blood. Sign him up." And that's how UGA became our mascot. But he got the nickname UGA from Billy Young, a fellow law school student with Sonny Seiler, who was from Columbus. And he says, "What are you going to name the Bulldog?" And Sonny said, "I don't know." And he says, "Name him UGA for University of Georgia." And it pronounced with muggle. It's not Yugal, it's UGA, pronounced with muggle. And that's how, and Sonny and Seiler and his Cecilia and his family, all of them, have done the greatest job with a mascot, carrying on that dynasty of mascots of any school in the United States of America. They've just done
50 years.
A magnificent job. And the first time we changed mascots, when UGA 1 was going to be replaced by UGA 2, he was getting too old, we had a changing of the mascots, changing of the dog. And it was a ceremony on the football field. And the band would play, and it was a good ceremony, and the cheerleaders would get the students to yell, "Damn good dog." That's when they began getting all that. But Sonny and Cecilia, and their children have just done one magnificent job.
I nearly cried when we did it the last time.
Yeah, it's no school has the history. And UGA 5, who was nicknamed McGillicuddy, named for me, was mascot of the year and was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And the greatest picture of UGA 5, though, was when he was an Auburn player had caught a touchdown pass, and UGA was in the end zone, and the Auburn player taunted UGA. He taunted him. He went over there with the ball and was shaking the ball, and he made UGA so mad he bit him, you know. That's a great picture.
Came back to get him. All right.
Well, I don't know whether he bit him actually, but he tried to. It's a great picture.
In 1954, you were named head coach of the tennis program, and as I said earlier, you were leading a rich, full life. I don't know how you did it.
Well, I became tennis coach in 1955, actually. Albert Jones was tennis coach. In those days, there were very, very few schools who had paid tennis coaches, and very few had scholarships. And those teams with coaches and scholarships dominated the sport. It was just a spring quarter sport, and at most schools, somebody on the faculty who had been a college player. Albert Jones had been captain of Georgia's team in the mid-30s. He was a good player and a good coach. And he was certainly worthy of being coach, paid coach. But they just coached for nothing in it. It was just spring quarter sport. And but when he was a law school professor, and when he became assistant to the president, Fred Davison, he had to give up his job coaching tennis. Coach Butts said for me to get a new coach. I tried to get Dr. Gerald Huff, head of the math department. He had played at SMU and coached at SMU, but he didn't have time. And I tried to get Dr. Robert West in the English department. He had been freshman coach at Georgia, he was coaching for nothing when I was a freshman. And he didn't have time. So the boys on the team who I'd played with in the summertime asked me to coach a team. I said, well, I'll do it 1 year. It was just two months. But I enjoyed it so much. It was stress relieving, and I need to have stress relieving work because of all the work I was doing. With all my jobs, I got to work at 7 o'clock about every morning, worked all day long, frequently 8 or 10 o'clock, 7 days a week, no vacation. I was a very poor husband and father, but fortunately I had a wonderful wife who did a great job with our children. But it was stress relieving. I really liked it so much that I just kept it up. Really loved it. Tyrus Raymond Cobb, I've got some stories on him. I had him down in 1957 for Coach Dr. Adderholt to give him a lifetime pass. Tyrus Raymond Cobb, the Georgia Peach. I had 4 interviews with him. He's the greatest guy. He wasn't the that mean guy. Well, I can't tell why he had a chip on his shoulder. It was because his father was killed. He worshipped his daddy, he was superintendent of school. I can't exactly tell this story, but his daddy he'd gone out of town, and he came back to town unexpectedly one night. He couldn't get in the house. He went in the window and he was shot dead.
Oh my!
It was either by his wife or her lover.
Oh my!
That ruined the young Cobb. He left town as a boy. He had a chip on his shoulder, and when he was playing baseball at 18 or 19 years old for Detroit, he'd go into the towns, and they would say, "Hey Cobb, who killed your mother? Who killed your daddy? Was it your mother or her lover?" And he would go up into the stands and just beat the hell out of the guys. And he had a chip on his shoulder all his life is due to that. And you see why?
Yeah.
Yeah, now I asked him one time, I had 4 interviews with him, 2 in 46, 1 in 50, and 1 in 57 just before he died. I asked him, I can't talk about Cobb though. What was that?
You asked him.
I asked him, I said, what's that story about you sharpening your spikes?
Yeah, going in.
He said, that's the biggest lie I ever told on me. There have been a lot of them. He said, I would clean my spikes. All baseball players clean the mud off the spikes. And that story started, we were playing somebody, and one of my teammates was up there on the dugout on the top cleaning his spikes, just cleaning the mud off. And they had a store, and there's Ty Cobb sharpening his spikes so he can cut them when he runs the bases. And but Ty Cobb was something. God, he was great. He was so nice to me. I could tell some stories on him. In 1950, we were playing. Well, I'll tell it later.
Go ahead.
Tell
you, Ty Cobb.
Yeah.
Bill will be running.
Well, in 1950, we were playing St. Mary's in San Francisco, Kezar Stadium, and Georgia's first famous coach was, the most famous coach that we ever had was Coach Charles Hurdy, because he invented the process by which you make paper out of pine pulp. But he was not a football coach, he just read from a rule book. But he was the most famous for that job he did, inventing paper out of pine pulp. But the process to it. But anyway, Pop Warner had been our coach, and later a famous coach of the Carlisle Indians, and Jim Thorpe, and a famous coach at Pittsburgh, and he retired after coaching Stanford. He was living in San Francisco. And I asked Coach Butts, could we invite old Pop Warner to sit on the Georgia bench during the game? He said, good idea. So I did, invited him, and he accepted. And when I saw him, he was old, and I said, Coach Warner, how you been doing? He says, I'm it up with arthritis. It up with arthritis. So then I asked Coach Butts, I said, can we invite Ty Cobb, who was living in Palo Alto then? Can we invite him to sit on the bench? He didn't go to Georgia, but in one of my interviews, he told me his daddy didn't want him to go to Georgia, study medicine. But he went into baseball. Anyway, Ty said, you can tell Coach Butts that I appreciate the invitation, but I don't want to sit on the bench. Can't see a damn thing from down there. I said, well, how about sitting in the grandstand, in the press box with me? He said, I'll take you up on that, and how about coming out and have supper with me tonight? And I did in Palo Alto. He was very nice to me.
That's a great opportunity. Let's go back then and talk a little bit about your family. Tell us what...
Well, I was just very lucky that Rosemary Reno agreed to marry me May 21st, 1944. And our first the child was born about a year later, and I wanted to be present for his birth. I was stationed at a base in North Carolina, and Rosemary had left to be in Athens for the birth, and I had asked for leave from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and he never got the leave. I was in San Francisco in the dentist's chair, getting the wisdom teeth pulled. That's what they do for all officers before they go overseas. There's no dentist out in the jungle. They have the wisdom teeth pulled. And while this dentist's name was Keyes, Lieutenant Commander Keyes, and I just asked him and making conversation, says, are you any kin to the movie star Evelyn Keyes, who played Sue Ellen, Scarlett O'Hara's younger sister, He says, she's my sister. And, but anyway, just as soon as he had finished, while he was taking my wisdom teeth out, I heard on the base's PA system, Lieutenant Magill report to the adjutant's office. So after he took my teeth out and stuffed both jaws with cotton, I went to the adjutant's office, and he says, Lieutenant Magill, I got good news and bad news for you. The good news is the Commandant has approved your request for leave. But it got lost in the shuffle when you were moving from North Carolina to out here in San Diego. He says, the bad news is you ain't got but 3 days left. I said, I'll take it. I want to be present for the birth. And the Marines, you've learned that they can do anything. So that was going to be a monstrous job for me to go back to Athens and be back to old. He said, you got to be back here by 0900 Monday. This was Friday afternoon. But the Marines have a motto, can do. They can do anything. So I can do it. So I caught a plane over the mountain from the Naval Air Station in San Diego to El Toro Marine Air Station right over the mountain. Spent the night there. The next morning, caught a Marine plane to the Eagle Mountain Lake Marine Air Station in Texas. Ned Hodson of Athens, a friend of mine, he was married to Marion Stegman, was executive officer there at that air station. So I just went straight to his office and I said, Ned, you got any planes going to Atlanta? And he says, no, I don't. I said, I need to get there. I told him why. He says, there's a plane leaving in about a half hour from Dallas-Fort Worth Avenue. I said, well, I can't make it. He said, yes, you can. I'll have my aide get in the Jeep and rush you there, and I'll call the airport and ask them to hold if they can. But we got there on time. I got in Atlanta, and later that day, afternoon, took a bus to Athens, and then I took a cab from the Greyhound bus station to Cherokee Avenue, and that night, Rosemary says, I think I better go to the hospital. So we went to Old St. Mary's Hospital there on the Millage, no longer there. Early the next morning, Ham was born. My son Ham, Daniel Hamson Magill III, he was born. Early the next morning, I kissed Rosemary and Ham goodbye, got the bus back to the Atlanta airport, caught an Army plane to Love Field in Texas, and then another service plane to Douglas, Arizona, took the bus into Tucson, Arizona, and early the next morning, it wasn't fall, got into San Diego, and I got there by 0900, can do, you know.
Wow.
And 2 days later, shipped out for the South Pacific. That was our first baby, and later we had two daughters, Sharon Reno Magill, and then we had a daughter, Molly Harvey Magill, named for my great-grandfather, Hugh Harmon Harvey, from down there in Jasper County, near Shadydale, Georgia. He had, after the war, you know, the one reason the United States has had so many more officers in the Army and Navy than any other section is because after the Civil War, they had no money to go to college, but they could go free to West Point or Annapolis. And my great-grandfather, Hugh Harmon Harvey, had an appointment to West Point, and he just got his education there, served his minimum time in the Army, and then he came back to Shadydale. And one time I asked my grandmother, I said, what did Papa Harvey do for a living? And she said, well, he didn't do anything. He was a gentleman. Oh, boy.
Oh. Well, let's go back then again, and let's talk a little bit about your tennis.
But anyway, getting back to my daughters, Sharon and Molly were graduates of Georgia. And they were both Chi Omegas of Georgia.
Beautiful women.
And pretty girls. And Sharon was Miss Cotton Bowl one year when we went out there. They let somebody at Georgia be the Miss Cotton Bowl, and she was Miss Cotton Bowl one year. And Ham, though, didn't go to Georgia. He was gifted, got his brains from his mother, or my grandmother. I mean, my mother, too, had brains, but and his mother had brains. And when he was in Barry Elementary, the teachers told Rosemary that he was gifted. And he went to Choate Prep School. And one reason she got the nursery school going is she needed some money to send him to Choate Prep School. But after his first year, he got an academic scholarship to Choate. And he graduated valedictorian at Choate. And he went to Princeton because his friends there at Choate were going to Princeton. And he was a champion tennis player. He and I won the Southern Father-Son doubles 5 times. But anyway, he went to Princeton and graduated magna cum laude in 3 years in English. He graduated in English, but he went to med school, and I think the reason he went to med school is because Rosemary's forebears had started the Tulane Medical School, and he got his med degree at Emory University. And during the Vietnam War, he was a doctor in the Air Force. And now he's got a cardiology group here in Athens. But he doesn't play any tennis anymore. But you see, I had 2 boys who were that we didn't have any scholarships when I was tennis coach. I just tried to develop Athens boys to be players, and we had one of them who won the national junior singles. Danny Birchmore beat Jimmy Connors in the quarterfinals, and Billy Lenoir was even better. He was probably the best boy we ever developed here, but his daddy, Professor James Lenoir, in the law school, Billy was national junior boys 18 champion, but he went to the University of Arizona because Professor Lenoir, oldest son, Carter Lenoir, had asthma so bad. That's the reason he moved out there, due to the climate in Arizona. And Billy went to Arizona, made an All-Americans in the Tennis Hall of Fame. Ham went to Princeton. If we'd had Billy Lenoir and Ham here at Georgia, of course we had no scholarships, and we'd have been better before we were.
Well, I was getting ready to talk about your tennis program. You coached 34 years, is that right?
Yeah, I really enjoyed coaching. It was stress relieving.
And you built it in one of the college tennis's most
we probably have the finest facilities here now. We became the mecca of college tennis. They put the Collegiate Tennis Hall of Fame here because we were putting on the NCAA championships. We drew the biggest crowds, and they put the Hall of Fame here, and I was trying to raise money for the Hall of Fame building. That was back in 1983. That was about the time Kenny Rogers married the beautiful Mary Ann Gordon of Athens. He had met her on the Hee Haw TV show. She was one of the pretty girls, never did say anything, just looked pretty. You remember Nurse Goodbody on that show? She wasn't Nurse Goodbody, but she could have been. And they moved to Athens, and she had helped me in her high school days. She had helped me because her grandmother was a bookkeeper in the athletic department, Ma Gordon. She was a bookkeeper, and she'd come down there, visit her grandmother, and the grandmother called me, says, "Mary Ann's getting away, I can't balance the books, put her to work." I paid her 50 cents an hour helping me in my office. Folding envelopes before we had folding machine, licking stamps before we had a stamp machine. Turned out to be the best investment I ever made. When she and Kenny were married, he built that Palace Four out there near Corbett, Georgia, and he had taken up tennis. And she brought him down here and wanted to know if he could play tennis. I said, sure. And then shortly thereafter, he said he wanted to make a financial donation to the tennis program, so we're trying to get money for the Hall of Fame. Well, he ended up paying the whole amount, $200,000. And he was a natural athlete. He never finished high school, never went to college and took part in sports, but he was a natural athlete and a great singer and made a lot of money out of it. And we benefited by it. And originally, I put a bronze plaque in front of the building and said, "Thank you, Kenny Rogers, for your generosity to college tennis." He said, "Take that sign down." I said, "You're the boss." I took it down. He said, "Put another one up there and say, 'Thank you, Mary Ann and Kenny Rogers.'" And that's the sign we have up in that bronze plaque. And then Kim Basin, another real pretty Athens girl, helps us out a lot. When she was a girl, a real pretty young girl, she used to come down and watch her daddy Don and brother Mick play in tournaments. And I put her to work at my drink stand. And when she was behind the counter, we sold more Coca-Colas than we ever had. She made more money on tips than I did the whole year on profit. I never saw one man that didn't give her $1 or a $5 bill and say, "Keep the change, honey." Never saw one woman tip her though. They were jealous. Well, she left Athens at a young age and went to New York to model. From there to Hollywood. I didn't see her for about 15 years, but I kept up with her, reading about her all the time, seeing some of the movies. And in the summer of 1990, we were having the Cracker Lane tennis tournament, and her brothers, Mick's little boys, were playing in the Cracker Lane tournament. They were good young athletes. One of them later was on the Georgia track team. And she came up to me. She had on a bandana and dark glasses. I didn't recognize them. She says, "Coach Magill, there sure have been a lot of changes around the tennis court since I used to sell you Coca-Colas." Then I recognized it. "Oh, Kim, boy, it's good to see you." And the next day, her brother said, "Kim wants to make a donation to the tennis program." He said, "What do you need?" I said, "Well, the NCAA wants us to get lights here, the best lights in the world, so that we can wait around if it rains and play at night, play outdoors. You know, this is supposed to be the outdoor championships. He says, what will it cost? I says, well, I don't know, between $80,000 and $100,000, I guess. The next day, Kim gave me a check for $90,000. And she was here for the dedication ceremonies and did a wonderful job.
You won 706 tennis matches. 706 to 183 was your record.
Yeah.
You had the most
That
wins.
was a record at that time. All records are made to be broken. And I coached 34 years, and Dick Gould, the great Stanford coach, coached 38 years, and he holds that record now. And I'm going to be out in Palo Alto. I've never been to Palo Alto in the daytime. I was there one night with Ty Cobb, and Dick Gould has asked me to come out there. He's putting it on. He'll do a great job, but I'll have to be there for the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. I'm still the curator and chairman of the Hall of Fame committee.
You won 13 SEC championships, 8 indoor, and 2 national championships. Is that right?
That's right. Our greatest player was a little Swede named Michael Pernfors. I almost didn't give him a scholarship. He wasn't but 5'7.5", but his coach down there at a junior college, Sanford Junior College, below Miami. There's a Sanford College in Birmingham. This is Sanford College below Miami. He wasn't a good player as a junior in Sweden, but he was good enough. They didn't even give him a scholarship to Sanford Junior College, but he went there and he played number 2 on the team. They had another Swede named Svensson, played 1, and he was undefeated at number 2. Then he was undefeated at number 1, and his coach, who I'd known, called me and wanted me to give him a scholarship. But by that time, we had choices of whoever we wanted to get, really. We'd become a power. And I wasn't going to give him a scholarship, but I had a call one day from one of my former players named Paul Grove, a left-hander from Decatur, Georgia. And he had played German team tennis, and he had also recommended Marsh Becker to me. And I got a letter from Marsh Becker saying, "Dear Herr Magill, I thank you for the scholarship offer, but I've just been selected to the German Davis Cup team, and I'm going to be on that." This was the same time I could have had Becker and Pernfors maybe. But he turned pro. And Paul Grove called me up and he says, "I understand you're interested in this little Swede, Michael Pernfors." And I said, "Yeah, have you ever seen him play?" He said, "Yeah, he just beat me in the finals of the professional tournament down here. I played as a pro, he played as an amateur." And I said, "Well, he'd be good enough to make our team. I may be interested in him." He says, "You better give him a scholarship. He'd be the best damn player you ever had." And he was. I gave him a scholarship, and at that time you couldn't work out. I don't know whether you can to this day. You couldn't work out a player if he visited. So on his visit to Athens, he couldn't work out. I didn't know what kind of player he was. Never seen him play till September of his first year. He only played 2 years as a junior college graduate. September of his first year, that was the fall of 1983, we had boot camp 2 weeks before school. I was working him out twice a day. His first workout, my assistant coach was Manuel Diaz, who's done a great job as a head coach. And Pernfors could hit the ball off balance better than anybody I'd ever seen. He was just very agile, very strong from the waist up. And I said, "That little Swede, he's going to be able to more than make our team. He's going to be our number 1 player." The next day, Pernfors was really trying to show me how good he was. He just pulled out all the stops. He was hitting the ball a mile a minute. And I turned to Manuel, I said, "That boy is good enough to win the NCAA tournament. He's caught on to my coaching faster than anybody I've ever had." And he did win the NCAA's 2 straight years. And he's been a great friend. He had tough luck. His high school sweetheart died in an automobile accident in Sweden. But he married late in life a Swedish girl named Hansen. And they had a little boy a couple of years ago, had an unusual name. It's a Swedish name called Figge, F-I-G-G-E. Figge, he got a little boy now.
What other players from your team?
Oh, we've had a lot of great players.
You mentioned Danny Birchmore.
Danny Birchmore was a wonderful player. And Norman Holmes was a wonderful player. He was from Florida. And Manuel, Coach Diaz, was a wonderful player. And quite a few.
Talk about Becky Birchmore, Coach.
Now, Becky was a good player too. I taught Becky how to play. And I tried to get a women's athletic program started at Georgia when we had the Wycliffe twins in Athens. They used to play on our courts in the early 50s, but the women in charge of women's intramural athletics didn't want an athletic program. They didn't need Title IX. All they had to do was just the women in charge of women. They could have had the women's program. And then I tried to get them to have a women's program when Barbara Dupree, Sterling Dupree's beautiful daughter, she became a state women's champion. They still didn't want a women's athletic program. And so Barbara Dupree had to settle for being Phi Beta Kappa and campus beauty queen. And having the beautiful daughter, who was on Miss Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah,
Julie Moran. She was Julie Bryan originally, because Barbara married a baseball player at Georgia named Bryan in Thomasville. She became selected one of the 50 most beautiful women on television or in the world, Julie Moran. But anyway, and then we had Becky Birchmore. Becky was a talented girl player. Danny was talented, Becky was talented. Of course, Fred was even more talented. Their father, Fred, who rode his bicycle around the world, and he was a conference boxing champion. I could talk forever on Fred. But Becky, about the time she was in college in the mid-60s, the Southeastern Conference said women can take part in college athletics if they can make the men's teams. And some of them made it in swimming as divers, some of them made it in tennis. And Becky earned a letter in tennis at Georgia. She couldn't make our men's team. I played as a substitute though. Fred helped me at the courts. I didn't have any help except me and Fred. He'd drag and roll the courts. He loved to work. Loved physical exercise. I could work all day. And Becky played on our team, and I played as a substitute, and she never lost a match. She won in singles and doubles. And the only girl ever made a letter on a men's athletic team at Georgia to this day. And when she was given an award that the Intercollegiate Tennis Association gives to people, former tennis players who've made lifetime achievements, great. She was head of the dermatology department at Harvard. And she got some kind of award, several $1,000s, that she was supposed to give to her college for their women's tennis program. But Becky stipulated that it not be for the women's program, it'd go to the men's program. And that's a true story.
You've seen some great athletes over the years, and not just in tennis, but all. If you were, what would be?
Well, Click Stark was one of the greatest. The old water boy at Georgia. He could throw a football 100 yards, and he threw a baseball the fastest. He was one of the greatest, and it's too bad they had not. Too bad that it was a long time later before they broke the color barrier with Jackie Robinson, who was a great athlete at UCLA, but he was born in Cairo, Georgia. Jackie Robinson was. But of course at Georgia we've had so many great ones. Bob McQuettle, I didn't see him play though, except softball. But Herschel Walker, of course, a great one. And Francis Tarkenton. We've had some great quarterbacks. I think Francis Tarkenton, Athens boy, named for the great Methodist Bishop Francis Asbury. Francis Tarkenton's daddy was a Methodist preacher. Tarkenton grew up at the Athens Y. He's a product of the Athens Y too. He used to play ball games out on Sanford Stadium before the regular game. The kids would play each other out there. And then he led Athens High to the state high school championship, beat Valdosta on Sanford Field one time. And then he led us to the conference championship. And in pro ball, he was even greater. He led the Minnesota Vikings to 3 Super Bowls, and his coach at Minnesota, Bud Grant, said Tarkington was the greatest quarterback ever to play in the NFL. He's in the National Football Hall of Fame, Professional Football Hall of Fame. He's in the National Collegiate Hall of Fame. And when we had our coronation party, you get that from? When we had our coronation party for the '59 championship team, Harold M. Walker, our beloved Port Laureate, ended a great toast to him. Here's to Athens' favorite son, the peerless pilot Tarkington. Of course, 2 of Georgia's greatest personages in athletics were Joel Eves. I had seen him play high school sports. He used to play for Old Tech High, and I'd seen him when he played for Auburn. He was a 3-sport star in football, baseball, and basketball. And he loved basketball. And when we dedicated the Stegman Coliseum, George Washington's birthday in 1964, he wanted the biggest crowd he could get. We ain't gonna turn away anybody. I promoted it, and we didn't turn anybody away. They sold all the tickets. We let everybody in. They sat in all the aisles. They sat out on the court. Their feet were on the boundary line. We had 15,000 fans there for the game, and we won the game over Tech. And but Coach Eves got cussed out afterwards because the fire marshal says you broke all the fire marshal's rules. Never again had there been that crowd. They wouldn't let them sit in the aisles. They wouldn't let them sit on the court. But that was a great thrill. And Coach Eves loved basketball. In fact, the basketball gym at Auburn is named for him. And Coach Dooley certainly was a great football coach at Georgia. His teams didn't make many mistakes, and I think that was really due to his training in the Marine Corps 2 years. They teach you not to make any mistakes. And his teams, if you don't make any mistakes, you can stay in the ball game. You don't get any penalties. And he had great control. His teams controlled the ball. They didn't make many mistakes. Well-disciplined teams. And his teams made a lot of money, and it enabled them to put that money into other sports. Football is the king sport. It pays for practically all the other sports, you know. And Coach Dooley winning teams helped put Georgia, other teams on the map, giving them, and it helped us have great facilities.
Well, anything you'd like to tell us? Any words of wisdom? A remarkable life and a remarkable memory, Coach
Well,
McGill.
I could talk forever on so many people I haven't named at Georgia. So many people.
I was going to say, we may have to do a part 2 sometime.
Well, I'd love to do it because I could talk forever on it. But I do have learned that what it takes to win in athletics, you got to get the horses to win the race. You got to have the material. You got to have coaches that do more good than harm. It's the horses that wins the race, not the coaches. Coaches, if they do more good than harm, all right. And then thirdly, you got to be lucky. You got to get the breaks, don't have your good players hurt, put in jail, flunking out. And then it also helps a lot if who you're playing's best players hurt. Those are the things it takes to win.
Those might be great words of wisdom to end on today.
All right.
I don't want Ms. McGill mad at me.
Oh, me either.